The current Galus, the current exile in which we find ourselves, began with Hashem pouring out His wrath and His anger upon the Yidden by burning the Beis HaMikdash and sending the Yidden into Galus, which has continued on for nearly 2,000 years until today. Interestingly enough, in regard to the moment of the Churban, the Gemara says in Yuma, Daf Nun Daled Amud Beis, and likewise in Psichta Te'echa Rabba Ois Tes, it says as follows, that B'shah Shenichnesu Nachrim LaHechel, when the Yidden went in to the Hechel, when they were busy beginning the Churban, they were busy beginning the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, they came in and they saw the Kruvim, that they were Mu'urin Zebazeh, they were facing each other with their hands towards each other. And it says the Goyim took the Kruvim outside to the Shuk, and they said, Yisrael halalu, look at these Yidden, that Birchasan bracha, v'kilulasan klala, if they give a bracha, their bracha is fulfilled. If they curse, chas v'shalom, somebody, then the curse will be fulfilled on that person. Yasku b'dvarim halalu. And it was clear that in the time of the Churban, when the Goyim came to do the Churban Beis HaMikdash, they found the Kruvim Mu'urim Zebozeh. When we think about this fact, we look back to the Gemara in Bava Basra Daf Tzadik Tes with the Rashbam, and the Gemara says over there that there's a machlokes how the Kruvim stood in the Beis HaMikdash. One shita says that they were Pneim Ishalachim, the Kruvim were facing each other, and the other man, the Omar, says that Pneim Labayis, that they were facing away from each other. And the Gemara asks, how do we reconcile these two sayings, these two opinions? So the Gemara says that it's not a steer, it's not a contradiction. Because really, it's talking about two different times. Kan bizman she Yisrael oisen ritzoni shel makim, v'kan bizman she'ein Yisrael oisen ritzoni shel makim. The Gemara says that the opinion which holds that the Kruvim were facing each other was talking about the times when the Yidden were doing the Ratzon of Hashem. They were following what Hashem wanted. In that time, to represent Hashem's closeness and Hashem's love towards the Yidden, the Kruvim were facing each other. But when the Yidden were not doing Ritzonei Shel Makom, the Kruvim were facing away from each other because the Yidden were not bringing out the love that Hashem has towards the Yidden. And we find also, interestingly, in Masechta Yuma, Daf Nun Daled Amud Aleph, that when the Yidden were oilo l'regel, when the Yidden came Yom Tov time to Yerushalayim, b'shah shehayu Yisrael oilem l'regel, megalgelin lahena paroiches. The Koyanim would pull the paroiches which separated the Kodesh from the Kodesh HaKadoshim, u'marin lahem es hakruvim shayu mu'urim zebazeh. And they showed the Yidden how the Kruvim were facing each other in a beloved manner. V'oimrim lahem, and the Koyanim would tell the Yidden who came to Yerushalayim, Re'uchi baschem l'fnei hamakim. Look how beloved you are before Hashem. And if so, the question is asked, if the summary of the stance of the Kruvim is that when the Kruvim are facing each other, it shows that the Yidden are oisen ritzonei shel makom, it shows that the Yidden are beloved in the eyes of Hashem. So then the question is asked, why? When the terrible Galus began and the Beis HaMikdash was set to fire and the Kruvim are facing each other, the Kruvim are Mu'urim Zebazeh, the Kruvim seem to be showing that the Yidden are oisen ritzonei shel makom and there's chiba l'fnei hamakom, it seems very, very contradictory that when there's anger going on and Hashem is angry at what the Yidden did, that the Yidden were not oisen ritzonei shel makom, and therefore Hashem is destroying the Beis HaMikdash. At the same time, the Kruvim are representing a belovedness between Hashem and the Yidden. One of the explanations which is given in the Likutei Sichos Krach Beis, page 360, it's given a mashal for what the Galus is like. A mashal for the Galus is that imagine there's a Rav who is teaching his beloved Talmud, and he's imparting chachma, he's imparting wisdom towards his Talmud. At a certain point in the middle of the lesson, the Rav suddenly gets a spark of a new depth, a new concept, a new depth that if he develops the concept and he thinks about it, he'll be able to give it over to his Talmud. And so, what the Rav will do is, he will, so to speak, figuratively, distance himself from the Talmud and delve into this new thought that just occurred to him. And the deeper the thought is, the deeper the concept is, the more the Rav, the more the teacher will delve into it and be more involved in that thought. Why is the Rav doing this? Why is he figuratively distancing himself from his beloved student who he loves to teach, he loves to impart to him information and depth and wisdom? Why is he making this distance? Because he wants to give him the new concept. The teacher, the Rav, wants to impart the new, deeper concept to his Talmud as well, which is going to bring out how much he cares about his Talmud, how much he cares about his student. And therefore, the deeper the concept is, the more the teacher will go into the concept. If you ask the student at the same time what's going on, the student is going to answer that he feels broken. He feels like he's in the middle of an exile. He feels like he's in the middle of a churban. His beloved teacher who always guides him and shows him the way is showing such distance. But in truth, it's not hatred. It's not a negativity from the part of the teacher why this student is feeling the exile, why this student is feeling the destruction. It's because of the love of the teacher that the student is feeling the destruction. And it's only temporary. Because as soon as the teacher is ready to impart the new piece of information that just occurred to him, then he will turn back to the student and enlighten him with the greatest wisdom that he had never imparted before. And a sort of hechrich, a proof, a reason why we must say that this is the concept of exile by us as well, that Hashem is preparing for us something amazing for the future. And part of this preparation is sort of distancing, turning himself away from us and being involved in preparing the amazing nifla'is, the wonders which are going to happen when Mashiach comes. That is a lot of what this Galus is about. Not just punishment, but to prepare the amazing things that are going to happen when Mashiach comes. A little bit of a hechrich for this is that if the Galus was only to get rid of Averis, and is not because the Hashem in the Nimshal is preparing for us the tremendous La'asid Lavai which is going to happen. So then the question is, according to this, the Galus should be getting lighter and lighter and lighter with time. It should be a softer Galus. It shouldn't be such a harsh Galus. Because with time, more Averis are being forgiven for, and therefore there should be less reason for Galus, and it should be more Mashiachdik, we should be feeling the wonders of the Geula much more. And yet, we see that in a certain sense, it's getting worse. We can give an example both from the first Galus, the Galus of Mitzrayim, and from our Galus. In the Galus of Mitzrayim, we know that the worst part of the Galus started from when Miriam was born. Miriam was born 86 years before the end of the Galus. And as it says in the Medrash, in Shir HaShirim Rabbah, Parsha Beis, on the pasuk of Kihine Hastav Avar, and also in Psikta Rabasi Tesvav Yud Aleph, that the worst part of the Galus was when Miriam was born towards the end of the stay in Mitzrayim. And we know even further, the Gzeira of Pari, the decree of Pari, that Teven ein niton lavadecha, that from now on the Yidden are going to have to gather their own Teven in order to make the Levanim, in order to make the bricks. That was right at the end. It was all the way at the end of the Galus. So we see that it kept on getting worse and worse. And likewise, by us, we know that the Tkufa in which we live towards the end of Galus is called Ikvasa de Mashiach. It's called the Ekev. And we know, it says in Avos de Reb Nosson, the end of Perek Lamed Aleph, that the Ekev has the least amount of life of the person. There's the head, there's the hands, there's a lot of life in a person. To the extent that the Avister Rab Nosson calls the Ekev, calls the heel, the Malach HaMoves Sheba Adam, because there's so little life over there that it's called the sort of the Malach HaMoves Sheba Adam. So we see at the end, it gets worse, it gets harder. And in our time, in a sense, there's lacking, there's such a lack of Gili Alikus. In the beginning of the Galus, of the current Galus, we had the Tanoim, we had the Amirayim, we had the Yiddish folk, the Yiddish nation had such great tzaddikim that although there were great tzaddikim and great gedolim throughout the generations, but it went less and less and less. And at this time, during Galus, we're at the lowest point. And therefore, if it was all about forgiving for Averis, it was all about kaparas v'avonis, if that's the whole point of the Galus, then many of the Averis were already forgiven for. We should be on a much higher level than they were in the beginning of the Galus. The beginning of the Galus should have been the worst, and with time it should be getting easier and easier. And therefore, we're mukhrach, there's a hechrich to say that the teichen of the Galus is more than just getting rid of Averis. It's that Hashem is getting more and more involved, more and more focused in preparing for us, His beloved Yidden. What's going to happen, Lasid Love? The tremendous things that the Nevi'im saw, and then some of them the Nevi'im told us about. Hashem is preparing and preparing and preparing to give us, His beloved nation, all of these neflois. And therefore, it makes a lot of sense that when the Nachrim came into the Heichel, they came to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. They were about to be meitzis the Beis HaMikdash bo'eish. They were about to set it afire. And at the same time, they see the Kruvim, our Mu'urim Zabazeh, are facing each other as if there's a beloved relationship going on between the Yidden and Hashem. The answer is yes. Externally, something terrible happened. The Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, the Yidden were sent into Galus. Externally, it's something that until Mashiach comes, we must mourn this. Nonetheless, we have to know that there's a message from the Kruvim facing each other. That the pnimius, the internal understanding of the Galus is not just how we see it externally. The internal understanding of the Galus is that Hashem internally loves us like the Rav loves his Talmud even when he turns away from his Talmud, because the reason why he's turning away is to prepare something new to give his Talmud. Hashem turned away from us, which resulted in the Galus, which resulted in the Chorban Beis HaMikdash, in order to give us something much greater, in order to give us something which is infinitely greater than we can imagine, and that will be with the coming of the Geula Hasidah speedily in our days.